They labor according to their own ability. The ants do. We who are saved, as I mentioned in Sundays past, we all have a purpose, especially when we're saved. We all have some type of ministry, whether it's to go out and witness, whether it's to, again, I said, bake goods. If somebody passes away, to comfort, pick up a phone. We all have a ministry, send cards. It's something that we all can do. And these ants all have a purpose. The Bible instructs us to go to the ant. The Bible says, go to the ant, thou sluggard. You see, and you can watch them work tirelessly. If it wasn't important, God wouldn't have placed it in 1611 King James. You see. Ants labor according to their own ability. There's one interesting of the ants. It's called the honeypot ant. He eats himself full of nectar and then feeds the rest of the nest. Isn't that a blessing? It's called the honeypot ant. He takes it all in, comes back, and feeds everybody else. You see? We need a lot of honeypot Christians, don't we? You see that each job in the church is important no matter what it is. We all fall into God's plan. And we need to be like that honeypot ant and honey instead of vinegar. God's work in His church is important. And each of us have a special gift. Ants can't build things like churches, but they can build, I've seen huge mounds. And have you ever just taken like a shovel or hoe and cut it at an angle? You can see all the little roads and the complex network of highways that's inside those ant hills. It's really phenomenal. You ever had one of them little ant farms when you were little? You could kind of see them tunnel different ways. The little glass thing on all sides you can look and see. It's really neat how they work. They work continually, all day. They don't get paid. No promotion. Nobody to go up to Brother Chris and say, Brother Chris, that was a good job. Brother Tommy, that was a good job, Brother Tommy. You see, Sister Lorelei, good job. Aunt, good job. I mean, there's no one to pat them on the back. They just do. And they do it without question. They work continually, without reward except for the food that they get and how they live. But their instinct tells them to prepare for the winter, whereas a lot of other insects die out. They can bury themselves deep and survive, the ones that are not at the end of their lifespan. You see? We can see that there's a lot we can learn from the ant. Indifference. Sometimes we as people are indifferent. We can be indifferent. We hear something and we either care one way or another. The ant's indifferent, but he's still working. You can be indifferent sitting on sidelines, but you can be indifferent and work. The ant works. When I was a little boy, how many of you used to have magnifying glasses when you were little? I used to get them out of the Cracker Jack boxes. I tried to burn leaves more so than insects, I will admit, but I probably got an insect or two through a magnifying glass. I know that's cruel. But I remember as a little boy on the front porch, had this little magnifying glass, and I was trying to get a leaf to burn because it's always angle the sun just right. And I saw these ants, and they were carrying a beetle. I mean, just like that, they were going to a restaurant. They were carrying this beetle all the way back, And on top of the beetle, there was an ant resting on the top, just like this. It was alive, but it was kicked back. And I looked at it through my magnifying glass, not to burn them, at least not them. But I could see there was one ant that was like kicked back, and he was resting. But I saw that single ant, or those couple ants dragging along that beetle many times his own size, and they were struggling trying to move that meal, and it was amazing what they were doing upon closer examination. The thing would be moving, and they all would fall in to get, it was just, and they're moving in a straight line. Keep in mind, they're moving in a straight line. But the others would fill in where the gaps were. See, they would fill in the gaps. You see? Upon, just looking at it, you see the thing moving in a straight line, and it was. But you get that magnifying glass out, and you could see that it would sway one way, and then a bunch of ants would run and catch it over here, and it would move this way. It's the neatest thing. I always remember that, looking at it through a magnifying glass as a child. And then, of course, those ants that were up there that weren't dead, that were either crawling on the top or riding on the top, and they were kind of getting a free ride there. But it is amazing. And sometimes it's what we see is, you see the ones at the top sometimes, and I say this, I think this is true probably in most schools that I've seen. You have, it could be true in churches or any organization. If we're talking about organizations in general, typically 10% do 90% of the work. It's kind of like those ants up there doing like this. But in school, for example, I'm a school principal, and I've got great staff and great teachers, but about 10% of the core teachers do 90% of the work. And that doesn't mean that the other teachers are lazy, it just means that they do more than the others. And I think that's true of most organizations. And it's also true sometimes of the ants. You know, sometimes they need a rest every once in a while. But we see that. Ants keep going in times of danger. Think about when you step on a mound, and all of a sudden now those ants start spreading everywhere. What are they doing? They work so hard the next day when you come back, you can't even hardly tell that your footprint was there. They'll build it back almost exactly the same. You're like, what in the world? And do you know that they're persistent? I did not know this. But if it's a small stream, do you know that the driver ant will lead the ants underneath the stream to get across? I had no idea. They could bury themselves down, go underneath the mud, underneath the stream, down deep enough, go across a little stream, a little ditch, and get across the other side. And then I didn't know this either. Did you know that an ant, if it needs to get across a river, they will actually form a ball and hold on to one another. And they will actually float in that water and move constantly so they don't drown. And they'll get across to the other side. And as soon as they hit that land, they scatter. But they come back to that straight line and follow that driver ant. Driver ant dies, somebody else will be first, and they'll follow that ant. You see? I mean, I had no idea about this. You see? They keep going in times of danger. Sometimes, you know, when Christians say we can't, you know, it cost the Israelites 40 years in the wilderness when they said that we can't do it. That time of testing there, you know, sometimes we say we can't, and what does it cost us? It could cost us sometimes our walk, it could cost testimony, it could cost other things sometimes when we say, I can't. And the Bible says, I can do all things through Christ, which what? Strengtheneth me. Philippians 4:13. You see, we're moving under the power of the Spirit. The ant's motivated by hunger, and we should hunger for the Spirit. You see, that's what we should do. And then there is another type of ant that's I had no idea this thing ever lived, and never seen one. It's called the shining slave maker ant. And these ants steal larvae, are called pupae, I hope I'm saying that correctly, which are eggs or larvae from other colonies, and they bring them back, not to eat, but they bring them back, and when they hatch, they actually work as if they were the own species of the other ant. They'll go and steal the larva, bring the larva back, and so they'll actually put them to work, and so that's all that ant knows. And they'll actually sit back and watch the other ants work. And that's called the shining slave maker ant. In fact, I was reading, if you take one of those shining slave maker ants, the ant themselves, not the ant, not the larva that they bring back, but just a slave maker ant, and you bring them and put them with food in a jar, they will die. Because the slave maker ant depends on the slave ants bringing them food and feeding them. See? Sounds like some churches, doesn't it?